I grew up bent over a chessboard. I love the word endgame. All my cousins looked worried. It was a small house near a Roman graveyard. Planes and tanks shook its window panes. A retired professor of astronomy taught me how to play. That must have been in 1944. In the set we were using, the paint had almost chipped off the black pieces. The white king was missing and had to be substituted for. I'm told, but do not believe, that that summer I witnessed men hung from telephone poles. I remember my mother blindfolding me a lot. She had a way of tucking my head suddenly under her overcoat. In chess, too, the professor told me, the masters played blindfolded, the great ones on several boards at the same time. Mm. Taking a comfortable seat and letting yourself drift back into your body. Maybe leaving your hands up in that pose of receptivity on your lap. And if you're sitting in a chair, just straightening the back slightly. And as I say, lengthening the neck by a millimeter. Arching the chin a little bit. And then letting everything soften, the muscles of the face, around the eyes, the ears, the muscles of the jaw, your cheeks, the back of the neck. And placing your awareness at the center of your forehead between your eyebrows. And thinking of that as the top of a pole that goes right down the center of your body. And everything else just sort of draped down around the top of the pole. And then opening the drawbridge of the heart. Sending all its archers and guards home for the day. And just for that experiment of a half an hour, being totally open to whatever comes and goes, in and out of your mind, in and out of your body, whatever emotions or feelings, aches and pains, just coming and going, coming and going. In the Bhagavad Gita, the gunas are spoken of, which are like the aggregates in Buddhism. They're the ropes that bind us into a separate identity. We We've spoken about the walls that liberate, the walls that hold us in and force us up. But in our practice, we just practice like water and things flow through us. They come and they go, and we watch them. We sit way back and become the witness. And then taking a deeper breath to the count of 4, breathing in with a pause at the top of the breath and breathing out to 5. And you might say, as you're breathing in, I know this is an illusory world. All of these separations seem real, but they're not true. And breathing out, you might say, but I choose this world to help relieve the suffering of others. Breathing in, I acknowledge the illusion of Maya. What a play this is, what a movie, what a game this is. Breathing out, I participate in the game. I'm an actor in this movie. I do a heck of a job. And then the last practice, you might just sit far, far, far back behind your body. Take a seat there. And from that position, you might think of your thoughts as numbers on a ticker tape, just passing by the screen. Stocks that you have not invested in. They're going up and they're going down. It's volatile, but it's none of your business. Breathing into the count of 4. And then releasing to the count of 5. Prodigy. I grew up bent over a chessboard. I loved the word endgame. All my cousins looked worried. It was a small house near a Roman graveyard. Planes and tanks shook its window panes. A retired professor of astronomy taught me how to play. That must have been in 1944. In the set we were using, the paint had almost chipped off the black pieces. The white king was missing and had to be substituted for. I'm told but do not believe that that summer I witnessed men hung from telephone poles. I remember my mother blindfolding me a lot. She had a way of tucking my head suddenly under her overcoat. In chess 2, the professor told me, the masters play blindfolded, the great ones on several boards at the same time. Simic was born in 1938, and he was a Serbian national who became a refugee as a very young boy. He and his mother and brother fled to Paris and stayed there until after the war, and then went on to Chicago, and then moved to New York, where he reunited with his father after many years. And he became a shirt salesman in the 1950s, eventually joined the army. And when he came back from the service, he started writing poetry. And he always said that the language that is his native language is the one that he speaks with an accent. He was an American poet, but he had really the rubble of Europe at the bedrock of his practice. This is a fitting poem for this week after the events of Tuesday and all of the stress and the anxiety that literally the entire world felt together simultaneously. It's also a great poem as an example of mindfulness, which is the seventh step in the Eightfold Path. And we're getting closer to the end. There are 8, and we're on number 7. Mindfulness in Pali is called Sati, Sati. And the word means remembering. Mindfulness is merely remembering. And this is a poem that's trying very hard to remember. It's about a child who's displaced by the forces that these master chess players are working, blindfolded, somewhere distant, playing on many boards at the same time, like a few world leaders who can cause so much disruption and displacement and terror and horror, not only in the lives of us, but of children who are scattered across the earth because of their impulses. But what I love about the poem is that, formally speaking, it's doing what it's describing. It's moving mindfully. The stanza breaks force us to walk slowly, like mindful walking, but it's doing it in the way that one would play a game of chess. Each move is advancing the poem further. And then there's a pause, and then the next move, and then there's a pause, and the next. It's called Prodigy because the boy at the center of all of this is a genius at surviving in this disorganized environment. And like a prodigy, he's both young and old at the same time. I love the first line. I use it all the time in my poetry courses as an example of a great line break that communicates everything that we need to know about the poem in a few words. And the lines are, I grew up bent over a chessboard. I grew up bent over, and that overcoat at the end, that too big overcoat that the mother is shielding him with, is turning him into a little old man, even though at this time he's 6 years old. What is mindfulness? It's such a huge question because the whole initiative that I started in 2022 uses this term as its umbrella. But mindfulness traditionally is taught as having 2 wings. One wing is wisdom, and the other wing is compassion. The wing of wisdom is clear seeing. In mindfulness, we simply see things just as they are. And the way that they are is that they are a dream. That, as Rilke says, there is really no harm in any of this. And when we practice like water, we let our thoughts come and go. We let our feelings come and go, because these aggregates that bind us, and these gunas and these ropes and the borders of our countries, are all just constructs. None of it's real. On the other side is compassion. And compassion involves engaging with the world as we encounter it, which is all of its brokenness and separateness, its borders, and its other people. It may not be real. It's mysterious. The source of it is unknown to us. And in this form, we'll never know it. But hey, this is where we are. This is the game we got plunked into. We have to learn the rules and play it as well as we can. And this balance between wisdom and compassion is so important to be seen as wings, because you can't have flight without the other. If you have too much compassion, you suffer from what Pema Chodron calls the near enemy, which is overwhelm. And if you have too much wisdom, so to speak, then you suffer from the cold feeling that why should I bother? And apathy might take over you. And ignorance, in other words, we ignore the suffering of others because we might say, well, it's all part of a grand plan and it has nothing to do with me. But when you bring these two together, when you act from that center where compassion is informed by wisdom and wisdom by compassion, you can hold both the very hot and the very cold at the same time and live in the world, but not be of it. In Zen, in Thich Nhat Hanh, this act of remembering is spoken of very simply. Washing the dishes, I think of washing the dishes. Standing in the field, I know that I'm standing in the field. We have to come home to where we are and what we're doing all the time. And we have to find practices that remind us to come back, remind us to remember. And his best example is finding a mindfulness bell for yourself. For me, the mindfulness bell is poetry, but it's also a few other things that I've picked up along the way. I've found that certain things that irritate me, whether I'm in traffic or whether it's the behavior of somebody who's sitting next to me at a restaurant, it could be any number of things. It could be the ringing of a cell phone. I take those things that irritate me and I make them the string around my finger. When I experience that, I remember to come home and to smile and to remember where I am. And with the use of that bell and with the practice of poetry, for me, I find that more and more consistently I can come home, even though it's my nature to drift away. So here's a poet who does that so well. Prodigy by Charles Simic. I grew up bent over a chessboard. I love the word endgame. All my cousins looked worried. It was a small house near a Roman graveyard. Planes and tanks shook its window panes. A retired professor of astronomy taught me how to play. That must have been in 1944. In the set we were using, the paint had chipped off the black pieces. The white king was missing and had to be substituted for. I'm told, but do not believe, that summer I witnessed men hung from telephone poles. I remember my mother blindfolding me a lot. She had a way of tucking my head suddenly under her overcoat. In chess 2, the professor told me, the masters played blindfolded, the great ones on several boards at the same time. So getting back into that comfortable seat. Your hands face up on your lap, open. As Michael Singer says, it's not about forcing yourself open. It's about finding yourself in that open space and just not closing. We find ourselves open. We fall in love, or we attend a funeral or a wedding, or something happens, and on the street we feel our hearts just burst open. And then the conscious choice we have is not to close too soon. To just remember and remember and remember, and make that your practice all day long. Breathing into the count of 4. With a pause at the top of the breath. And then breathing out to 5. Breathing into the count of 4. I want to dedicate my practice to children in the position of this child in this poem. Breathing out to the count of 5. And in the forge of the heart, I turn that suffering into compassion. Breathing in, I know this is an illusory world. Breathing out, I choose this world to help relieve the suffering of others. There's a famous story by Somerset Maugham called The Verger, and it's about Mr. Foreman, who was the verger, or the lay minister in a local Anglican church. And he had been in the service of a great Lord since he was 12 and never learned to read or write. And it came out when he was now in his 60s that he couldn't read or write. And the deacons of the church said, "You're going to have to leave. We need someone here who can read or write to pass along information, to read names, to make telephone calls. We're so sorry, but you'll have to leave." And Mr. Foreman felt completely thrust out into the world by this unfairness. And his response to it was that he opened a shop. He used up his savings to create the old world for his small town, the world that he learned as a butler in the service of this Lord. And it became immensely popular for all of the travelers passing through the town, especially the Americans. and he opened several other shops. And these shops got the attention of a big corporation that approached him and said, "We want to create franchises of this magnificent business that you've developed." And they were sitting across the conference table from each other, and he only had to sign his contract. And Mr. Foreman had to admit at that moment, I can't read or write. I'm sorry, I can't read this contract or sign it right now. We'll have to find another way. And the tycoon on the other side of the table said, "My God, man, you're telling me that you created this magnificent business and you couldn't read or write? What would you have done with your life if you had learned to read or write?" He says, Mr. Foreman says, "I can tell you exactly what I would have done. I would still be the verger at St. Peter's, Neville Square. The walls that wrap around us and divide us and separate us don't necessarily have to be a punishment, but they can liberate us. They can force us up, as they did for Mr. Foreman, and as they surely did for Charles Simic, who used all of that difficulty of his childhood to create beautiful poetry for the rest of his life. But in the second half of this talk on mindfulness, which will start next week, we'll look at the other side, which is letting go of the walls, letting it all pass through, practicing like water. But for now, I want to celebrate those challenges. And the last thing I'll say is that there's a line from the Gnostic Gospels that I use in my poetry classes all the time. And the Jesus of that gospel of Thomas says to them, radically, "I've not come to save you, but to disturb you. And by disturbing you, awaken you." Here's Prodigy one more time. I grew up bent over a chessboard. I love the word endgame. All my cousins looked worried. It was a small house near a Roman graveyard. Planes and tanks shook its window panes. A retired professor of astronomy taught me how to play. That must have been in 1944. In the set we were using, the paint had almost chipped off the black pieces. The white king was missing and had to be substituted for. I'm told, but do not believe, that summer I witnessed men hung from telephone poles. I remember my mother blindfolding me a lot. She had a way of tucking my head suddenly under her overcoat. In chess, too, the professor told me, the masters play blindfolded, the great ones on several boards at the same time.